Well, good morning. Welcome to our West Region Cattle Marketing Program online. This is a first for everybody, so we're trying something new and hopefully it works. It's kind of some challenging times that we have here. As we go through here, we'll have some people getting on and stuff, but just something goes wrong, just please be patient with us and we'll get it worked out. Today, I think we got a really interesting program for you. And before we get started, we just wanted to recognize everybody on our West Region Cattle Marketing team, which is me, Jamie Osborne, Chase McFall, Scott Anderson, Morgan Runyon, Nick Dixon, Heath Lusty, Michael Walker, Chad Coburn, Raymond Quigg, Dina Floyd, Sammy Lindsay, Jessica McCroy, and Lacey Kennedy, along with Robert Pritz, our regional program director, Bill Thompson, our West Region economist, kind of put this program together, and just want to say a big thank you to you guys for helping get this put together. Kind of our process today, we've got two speakers and we don't want to go too long. So it's going to be about an hour, which is about as long as my attention span can take. Sometimes not even that long, my wife says, but anyway, we'll kind of go through it. First off, we're going to have Ken Jordan, who's the owner of Jordan Cattle Auction, who's going to talk about our process today and just kind of what's going on with the cattle marketing program and marketing and the beef cattle industry and in general in terms of dealing with COVID-19. And then we'll have Dr. David Anderson, who is a professor and economist and specializes in livestock and food marketing. Production marketing. Those two guys will kind of give you their take on what's going on through the cattle marketing program and kind of dealing with COVID-19. We certainly appreciate you being on with us today. Kind of the process will be Chase McFall will kind of be monitoring our chat deal. So what we'll do is we'll have both gentlemen give their presentations. And you can write your questions down at that time if you want to, but we're going to answer the questions at the end at both of them giving their talks. So with that, we want to thank you for coming on today. Hope it turns out real good for you and hope everything goes wrong. If something's not right with your deal and can't hear something, you might put a message in the chat box to Chase and we'll try to get that figured out. But with that, first we'll have up Mr. Ken Jordan. And Ken, we certainly appreciate taking time out of your busy day. I know you've got a auction here in a little bit in Mason, getting ready to start, but we certainly appreciate your time and consideration coming on with us and helping us with this program.
You bet, Jamie. Thank you. And it's good to be here today. Any of y'all watching, I'm using a mobile phone. I don't have a computer right here in front of me since I'm over at Mason. We're getting ready for our sale today. And it looked like we're going to have close to around 600 and something head, looked like it on the market today. So a pleasure to be here. These are very interesting times, as most everybody knows. We kind of went through some difficult times when we had the Tyson fire last August, and we had about 5,200 head a week kill capacity that was in place for almost 4 or 5 months there. And that really affected us. That was right at 20,000 or 30, 40,000 head a week that we lacked in order to be able to process. And it definitely hampered the market a lot during that time frame. Some cattle got backed up and so forth. Had to change a lot of their packing houses too. We got through that, rolled in December, market very strong, rolled into January, very, very strong market. Things look really good. On into February, we started getting rains, things look good. And then we walk along, and here comes March, which you've already heard about COVID-19 prior to that, but really it hadn't been in the United States very much at that point in time. But then here it came, and all of a sudden things began to happen in different parts of the country, especially California, the state of Washington, and also in New York as being hit right at the first. And as most people know, California and Washington kind of got their stay-at-home orders put in place very quickly. So they pretty well got the contained. New York's just a lot more people there, a lot more travel. They've had major problems in trying to deal with the COVID-19 in that state. As it goes on, all states have been affected. Not all counties, like here in the state of Texas, have been affected yet. There's still a number of the rural counties that have not a case yet. So that's kind of where we stand as a whole. COVID-19 has really changed a lot of things. We're in a territory that I would say is unknown. We really don't have a model to go by and how this thing may come out, what we may look at when we come out, how soon we come out. A lot of those things are still kind of up in the air. A lot of folks, I think, are making a lot of decisions right now that how to open our state back up, open our country back up with a lot more testing, maybe people wearing masks, whatever it may be. We're working on a vaccine that's happening extremely fast, but still going to take time to do test models and all that. So in the meantime, we got to look at where we're at, what's been happening, and maybe what may occur down the road. Well, the biggest thing is we have had most everybody in the states and a lot of the counties, especially in Texas as a whole, most all the state is under a stay-at-home policy. A lot of counties and cities did this also. Some went a little further, some than others did. So basically, our big thing we have right now is we have to have physical separation if you do get out and around public, and also advising everybody to stay at home if you do, unless you go to an essential business as a whole. We as a cattle auction, we're considered an essential business, so we can operate here. But we have certain guidelines that we got to follow too. We want to try to keep everybody protected because if you do have someone come up with COVID-19 and they test positive, then they'll come in here, the state will determine who you've been in contact with, and then basically allow y'all to be at home for 14 days, self-isolate. And so you don't want that because that's part of your business, and the folks that in there that run it, we need them to stay on board. So we've had a lot of things that we've done. We don't allow now buyers and sellers in the lobby. We also allow essential buyers in the ring. We have gone to at a location in Saba, we have gone to taping off 2 seats in between every buyer because those all have stadium chairs. Here at Mason, we're a little different. We got more bleachers here. But we have really implemented that. We have hand sanitizer at every location. We've even protected the ladies in the office here by putting curtains up in there so that they have some barrier of between them and the folks they're dealing with, whether it be a buyer or a seller. We've had that done several weeks now. Also, we have several guys that are wearing masks now at the unloading area. Depending on which location we're at, they're set up a little differently in order that we protect them too as they come in. At location Saba, we also trying to get the folks not to get out of your vehicle. That way they can be safer, we can be safer too. So it has changed the model. We do have X's in our lobby. I never dreamed in my lifetime where I'd have X's and everybody have to separate 6 feet, but we have put that in place mainly to take care of our customers, both buyers and sellers, and our employees also. So those are some things that really have changed it. We have had to postpone, which we have a lot of bull sales and quite a number of female sales. We were to have 2 bull sales I've already postponed right now. Haven't yet set a date for those. We had 1 female sale that we were supposed to have this past Saturday. I had about 3,000 head come for it. I had to postpone it because our sales as a whole, if you draw a large crowd, you could get 300 people in an auditorium. That's not something we want to do. It's not something the state or the county or city would want us to do. Folks getting in there and possibly becoming contaminated and getting the COVID-19. So we've had to postpone all those because those sales do draw very large crowds. And we have those crowds there in order for the bidding process to work properly. So those are postponed this time. We are looking at a few of these sales in May, possibly be 100% online. We do online have our bull sales and female sales. So we're looking at one of those sales so we can go ahead and get some of the cattle that need to be moved from some of our customers, especially females or bulls, merchandise them that away. So we'll be letting you know here in a few more weeks regarding that. You go into the different things, and one thing that folks have really just changed the whole structure. We went from basically, I don't know exactly the numbers, I've read different ones, about 45 to 50% of our meals were being eaten at home and the balance of them being at restaurants. Well, all of a sudden, you basically shut down the restaurant trade almost totally. We do have about probably 5 to 10% doing takeout or whatever it is. But all of a sudden, your whole companies that manufacture stuff for retailers and manufacture stuff for grocery stores, 2 different combinations of product they have for those stores and facilities. So it's really changed the mix of it all. It's very interesting to watch how our products, both in the round area and you look at your middle meat cuts, the middle meat cuts have come down a great deal in overall price, not too far from what the rounds and back end cuts do right now. And that's because that a lot of hamburger, a lot of roast, a lot of sirloins, those are easier to use at home, whereas the fillets, ribeyes, those are a lot more of those have been done and used at the restaurants. So we've seen one value drop, the other value increase. So it's been quite a change there. And also, you got to look at the whole manufacturing. Somebody said, why can't we get all that product into the grocery store? Well, a lot of the processing plants are different ones that fabricate these products. It's not very easy to change that way of fabricating it to what they need in the grocery store area. Same way as we hear about milk. Somebody said, well, why do we have to dump it? Well, there's a surplus out there right now because those companies and plants that had where they could do the school lunch milk, the smaller cartons, they can't convert that plant very quickly into basically filling about gallon jugs like you use at the grocery stores. So a lot of those things have been in place. That's why you're seeing some of the milk being dumped out because of their processing. We don't have the capability to produce the type of milk that we use in a grocery store or whatever. Also, they talk about is butter and cheese. A lot of that's eaten at the restaurants. Since we moved away from restaurants, everybody at home, that butter and cheese is not being eaten as quickly and as fast. And so it's not being consumed as much. So now we have an overproduction of the dairy products. So that's kind of interesting to watch how that all has occurred. Now you get into the market, folks, and where we're at today. When this thing started kind of in March, and we started really seeing the difference, I was over here on a Monday and talked to a couple of my guys that I deal with on fat cattle and everything else. And that morning on Monday, they all started offering, the Packers did, $1.05. And then by noon, they're at $1.10. And then by the next couple of days on Wednesday, they hit $1.13. And then the following week, we're at $1.20. With a $5 add-on from several plants that Tyson's one of them that added $5 on any cattle that got processed with them that particular week. And then we turn right around and the following week we're down at $1.13, then again at $1.05. So we've had a lot of different things that have occurred here. We've had a futures market that has been very, very problematic and really the direction it's going. I think a lot of those have been just concerned down the road. What kind of economic effect is this whole shutdown going to have on our industry? Is it going to a lot more people not have money to buy steaks and our beef products or whatever it may be? There's indicating on the futures that it may be a little tougher down the road. However, when you look at reality, though, we've been anywhere between what the futures market's showing on live cattle, and you can also kind of say feeder cattle. We've had a difference between what cattle are actually bringing in the futures up to $25 a hundred difference. This just past week, we traded cattle at very, very few at $1.05, but that's what's quoted. And we had the futures market sitting in there for April at right at 95. So we had a $10 spread right there. And so we're moving the product. There is demand for it. And so it's moved pretty good. Now, except this last week and a half, we started seeing in numerous plants, and we're not the only ones that are having it. The beef industry is, the poultry industry is having some. I understand now the pork industry is having quite a bit of it. A lot of these processing plants, they work a lot of folks. They have a lot of employees. They'll have anywhere from 1,000 to maybe 3,000, 4,000 employees. We started seeing large numbers of COVID-19 showing up on these employees. And when that occurred, lots of these counties and cities began to work with these plants in order to figure out how they can make the environment of the employees much safer, these plants. So several of them have shut down. And they shut down to not only clean, but also to put different panels in, whether it be curtains of some sort to separate these workers on the lines here, or they've added masks, or they added shields, whatever it may be, different ways when they take a break, how they're going to take a break so they're not so congregated together, and really trying to get them being physically separated, that 6 feet as much as they possibly can, and keep the plant operating. So all those things have been put in place. They have also ordered a large number of testing kits so they can begin testing a lot of their employees, then separating those out that are sick or not and their families, and be able to control the environment more or less for their health. So this has caused quite a bit of disruption. The last 2 weeks now, with several of these plants shut down, we're harvesting right at 20,000 less cattle a day than we did a couple of weeks ago. You multiply that times 6 days, you're talking about 120,000 head of cattle less per week we're harvesting right now. So we're looking, hopefully some of the plants, I think one of the beef plants coming on today. We got another one coming back on again in a couple of weeks. So hopefully we don't back up a tremendous amount of cattle in the feed yard. Last couple of weeks, probably close to 200 to 230,000 cattle have been backed up right now that we normally would have harvested. And so those are being backed up. So you worry about is how do we move that product? These cattle get too heavy, too big, they get discounted, all those sort of things. We put more pounds on the marketplace. So the quicker we can move getting these packers operating and going again, the better off we are. I do understand there's several folks that are looking at putting some of these fat cattle on a maintain. I'm not sure if the government's insisting on that or not. They have talked about that, but possibly moving into maintaining ration so they can hold these cattle up and have a more normal marketing period. So you look at that, it's very interesting when you see that. We had the 5,200 a day that we missed for almost 4 months when Tyson closed out the fire. We have 20,000 head at least we're missing right now per day, 120,000 a week. Hopefully it doesn't go very much longer and we get back to normal operation and it won't affect us quite as much as it has in the past. Some interesting things that we do during this time frame. Y'all have heard the national news, probably less beef in the grocery stores. We've been to a couple of them this weekend, just kind of, and what I've reported from so far, we have not seen that, but it could be if the pipeline stays kind of tight for another couple of weeks or so. It's not that we don't have the cattle. We've got the cattle going in the yard, in the packing house. We just don't have enough packers operating right now because of COVID-19. So hopefully we'll get this addressed very, very quickly. At least we can hold these cattle maybe a little bit. You get in the swine industry and some of those other things where they're tightly coordinated. I understand they're having a lot of problems right now in moving their other smaller pigs into the marketplace at this point in time. So we don't have that kind of situation at this point. If we do have to keep them for a long period of time, then we do have to address a lot of the problems out in front of us. Something that is kind of interesting, I guess you say, this past week, probably the first time they said since mandatory reporting has occurred since 2001, we had less than 10,000 head of cattle trade in cash this week. So a lot of the cattle that are out there on farmers and everything, they've already got their slot to be harvested at these plants. So if you're just sitting out here and have no relationship with a packer at this point in time, those cash cattle that you may try to sell, there may not be a home for them at all. There's nobody needing to buy any of those cash cattle much right now because all their packing houses are fully full of committed cattle. So those cattle are sitting on the side. And they said there's only less than 10,000 traded cash. So that kind of gets concerned about what the real market is, where are we really at, because that few traded. There were a few cattle that did not have any slots whatsoever. They finally took 95 cents this week while the others took $1.05. So kind of interesting watching that and watching where we're going. Now, one other number that I'd like to mention too is in the last 4 weeks, the volume at the markets, that including ours too, they have seen feeder cattle numbers in the last 3 weeks almost 50% lower than last year. And that's been in the last just 3 to 4 weeks. So that means we got a lot of cattle that are being held out there. They're not being sold. A lot of wheat field cattle that we know because of what the price is today, that a lot of them have not moved to town. At some point, they will have to move town because the wheat and oats will play out here in May. And so I think if the folks out there, they're either looking at feeding these cattle, they're looking, hoping for a better price at some point in time. And if they can, but at some point in time, these cattle have to go to the feed yard or it'll have to be put on the marketplace and sold to the next buyer along the chain. So now you get into your cow-calf operations. We have had abundant rainfall in a large number of areas. That has allowed a lot of the folks that aren't completely satisfied with the marketplace. They got time to hold those cattle on into the later summer and grow them on out there. So thank goodness we have had the good moisture. We've had the ability to grow some grass and in pretty good situation. So that allows us to be able to hold up a little longer on those cow-calf operations this time. Packer cows have been doing pretty good. We've had a roller coaster on them too. We had real high here about 3 weeks ago. And when they got that high, then here came the milk situation where they started really, when milk got down in the low 13s or whatever, a lot of the dairies started just taking every one of their marginal cows and bringing them to town. Some of those dairies, if I understand, have taken away 20% of the herd, some less, some 10, some 5%, but they hit the market very quickly and the packer cows dropped. Last week, this kind of came back, evened out a little bit, I think Packer cows and bulls are in a little better shape at this point in time. We have had 1 or 2 plants, the cow-kill plants, that have had COVID-19 up in Pennsylvania. They've had to shut down, but they're, I think, back and operational. They're cleaning up some fat cattle, then they'll start harvesting some regular cows at that point in time. So we've been through quite a roller coaster, I guess you could say. I think the number of cattle on feed, if y'all been watching it, our January and February cattle on feed were way below a year ago. I think you're going to see March be extremely low. And I think what we're indicating right now, April is going to be extremely low. So when we get out 6 months from now, we'll have a lot less cattle that will be coming out to be harvested at the packing house at that point in time. So keep that in mind as you move on. We may see a lot higher price depending on what things do as we move on because of the last cattle being placed on feed. I do think we'll have a lot of cattle put on feed in May, and they may try to work those cattle out, even out some of those lower numbers on in the fall as this big group of cattle come out in May after they get to the feed yard. So those are some of the things we got to look at. Our product is very safe. I was watching some of the news this weekend, and that's one question that's being asked, and they were all talking about how safe our product is. It's safe even though an employee may have it or whatever. Packaging is safe, the product's safe, it's healthy, it's good to eat. So at least we do have that out in the public that it's coming out to be a very, very safe product. So we're pleased with that. What's in front of us the next few weeks? I'm on a call with the governor usually once a week, the judges and mayors of different areas. And this past Friday, we opened up some few things, some parks and some other things. He discussed basically on the 27th of this month, will be next week. They've got a task force of doctors and several business folks. They're looking at how to gradually open our economy back up. I think by May 1st, May 4th, we'll have a lot more businesses that will be opened up. It's kind of like I was saying the other day, the longer you leave this tractor sitting there, not cranking it, not running it, not seeing the battery's good, the harder and harder it's going to get to start. But I think you'll see a lot of physical separation. You may see a lot more people wearing masks around. I think those are going to be some of the requirements. But most people I talked to said they'll be willing to do that to get us up and going and get the economy moving. The longer we wait, the more jobs that we have out, 22 million unemployment jobs as of last week. I'm sure there's a lot more because on our governor's call, they're not even caught up at the Workforce Commission in almost any of these states. They're processing as many as they can. They've hired lots of other people, and it's still taking some time to get on board for that. I do think as a whole, the SBA deal, the loan program, I understand from this morning, there's going to be about another $250 billion that will be allocated for that loan program, which is through your banks. There have been a lot of the small businesses throughout our Central Texas area have been able to get that. I was just totally amazed how fast that did move through the program with the lenders running that program. It moved the money through and out to the area a lot faster than had the government, or we had to go through actually the government to go and get it. So that program, I think, has been very, very good. It's helpful. And so with that, I think we just got to tread the water, keep praise to what's going on. I do have hope after our governor's talk on Friday that we are now beginning to look up how we open up. How do we get back going again? I think there's going to be a lot more testing if we can get the kits out, and that'll allow us to somewhat get back. I'm not saying total normal at all at this point in time. I think it's going to be gradual. I think a vaccine has to probably come available to us to really feel comfortable, or an antibody test on a large volume. There's a lot of folks think a lot of people have had this already and just don't even know it because symptoms vary among individuals. So with that, Jamie, we'll pass it on, and I hope I gave you some valuable information on where this market's going, what we see it as. Feel free to call your livestock marketer. I have no problem somebody giving us a call. We'll help you. This thing changes daily. As most of we're talking right before the call, oil dropped from 20 bucks down to about $10 and something. It's up above 11 just while I look. And so that thing can definitely have an impact here in Texas too. So every day is something new, something interesting happening, but I hope more positive news, more opening up will occur within the next week or so.
All right. Thanks, Ken. And too, with that, Ken has been very helpful to people around our area about answering questions and helping us out when we can. And also, if you do have any more questions, each one of your county agents represented in the whole West region would be willing to help with those questions also. So give us a call, give Ken a call, or whatever. We certainly appreciate you being here today. And Ken's going to stay until David's done, and we'll get some questions answered after that. Okay, Mr. David, if you're ready.
I'm ready.
Thank you.
Looks like it's sharing the screen. Hey, hopefully y'all can see that good.
Good, here we go.
I,
I don't see those charts.
luckily, I don't think I've muted myself, which is always a risk you run in this deal. Hey, it's great to be here. I'm going to show you some charts that I think is going to dovetail with what Ken said very well. For sometimes I'm more picture oriented, so I'm going to show you some charts, some pictures. The things as I would say if I was thinking about the overall market, you know what, this is not normal times. We're in uncharted waters. And, if we're in that in the whole economy, we're going to be in that in the cattle market too. I think looking forward, the whole, the volatility of prices, the uncertainty of where we're going, how we open up, how the economy opens up, how all of us go back to our normal practices, go back to buying stuff. I think one of the things that's pretty instructive is we think of the overall economy. About 70% of our total economy is consumers spending money. And when we've closed all these restaurants, we've closed all these businesses, we've slowed down all kinds of stuff. We've got, skyrocketing unemployment. For those of us who have jobs, when this gets opened back up, how we go back and spend is going to be key to what we get back to, how fast our economy opens. And so if we dive into the cattle market a little bit, I think that's pretty instructive to think about, have those things in mind for where we go down the road, because that's really going to affect demand for our product. And, we're really, right before this started, we were really in the last 4 or 5 years of beef demand that is really the best we've had in 25 years. We had strong demand for our product. Not only domestic markets, but our export markets as well. And so really our cattle markets reflecting this not normal, this shift from restaurants to grocery stores, volatility and uncertainty, and certainly packing plant closures and slowdowns and whatnot. And so, let's take a look at a set of charts. I want to point out a couple other keys to keep going through as I go through this. Volatility, certainly. Really, as we look at the futures market and what it has done in terms of cattle prices, one of the important things it has priced in is this idea of a recession or worse. The other word nobody wants to mention, but certainly this recession idea is affecting our cattle markets in terms of the futures market and future expectations of prices. The other thing I'd say is, I think this is going to ripple through the market for a long time. How long plants are closed, how long we're slowed down, certainly will affect this backing up of cattle, weights, some price pressures down the road, certainly, and I'll show you some cattle on feed stuff too, but I get back to a fundamental idea of long-term versus short-term. And short-term, the next couple of months, certainly lots of turmoil, lots of volatility, lots of volatile prices. And we all have to make the best decision we can during this time. Longer term, I'll say I'm pretty optimistic about the cattle market longer term. We've had this period of time of really good demand. We had a peak in cow numbers in our cyclical cattle industry. Our cattle cycle peak was last year. Peak beef production this year, yet declining numbers, some tighter supplies longer term, and I think better prices. And so, really this idea of, we got to get through the short term to get to this long term, yet I think longer term, there's a lot of reason for optimism. So let me show you a few charts that go with this idea of volatility and these ripples that we're going to see in the marketplace. Mr. Jordan mentioned this really slowdown in cattle slaughter. I thought I'd put a chart together and just show you can see exactly, look at this decline in 2019. If you're looking at my screen here, this dark solid blue line is 2020, dotted line is last year. The red line is a 5-year average. And just take a look at that decline in cattle slaughter over the last month. As we've closed down, as certainly we've closed plants, and as we've had to slow down plants. You know, we've gone from over 675,000 head of cattle slaughter about a month ago to 500,000 last week. And so certainly, you know, I think this chart really brings home this idea of this slowdown, the effect of closing plants in cattle movement. And we know in any of our livestock agriculture, we've already produced the livestock. And so sooner or later, those are going to come to market. And so, you know, I think this really is pretty instructive on, it gives you a good idea, a picture in your mind of what this slowdown really means. Certainly part of beef production is weights. Throughout this year, we've had heavier weights than a year ago. One of the things we always worry about in things like this, if we slow down slaughter, the cattle are still there, we run the risk of even heavier weights. Yet we've been dealing with heavy weights already. Let me go back one chart again, back to that cattle slaughter. I'd point out, you know, earlier this year, we actually were running large numbers of cattle through packing plants. We had a lot of beef production going on, a lot of cattle movement, and in a way, that's actually sort of positive in terms of we moved so many cattle already that it did pull down some of the numbers that we have available. And I think that's probably kind of a little bit of a bright spot. But again, cattle slaughter, heavier weights. If we take a look at beef production, which is really just, you know, the number of cattle we slaughter times their weights, you see that exact same decline in beef production. So as you know, this rippling through the market of, you know, closing restaurants, trying to shift product to grocery stores, slowdowns, not only at packing, but I think it's worth remembering processing as well. You know, a lot of our beef, you know, a lot of our packers have further processing there where they may even have a case-ready product that goes straight to grocery stores. Yet we still have large processing facilities that take beef from our packers, and they may turn it into hamburger patties. They're cutting up parts into further value-added functions and getting those out to stores and restaurants. So it's worth remembering, not only do we have some closures at packing plants, but some further processing is seeing those problems as well. But certainly beef production reflects exactly what we're seeing in terms of slaughter. You know, cattle on feed, this exactly what we're seeing of a lot slower runs through auction markets, a lot slower movement of placements. I'm one of the sort of market analysts, economists that does some projections every month of kind of pre-report of USDA's cattle on feed report. So what I did here is I took a chart of cattle on feed. That April number represents my projection of cattle on feed numbers when the report comes out on Friday. So the report's not going to come out till this coming Friday, but my projection is that we're going to be down, placements will be down at 20%. That gets us to cattle on feed numbers about 5% lower than a year ago. We had marketings up, movement to slaughter up about a little over 12.5% in March. So again, this idea of, you know, this ripple through our market as things back up from the retail sector all the way through with much lower futures market prices for cattle, looking way out into the future. We've got sharply lower placements. And so what that means going forward is certainly the expectation of some tighter cattle supplies, some tighter beef supplies going forward as we respond to the market effects of just plain lower prices and all this turmoil in the marketplace. So that gives you an idea if you see some news on Friday afternoon about the cattle on feed report, at least put some numbers in mind to compare against what we see. I've certainly seen some estimates with even lower placements than I have, which would correspond to also some even fewer numbers of cattle on feed going forward. Jump into prices. You know, that volatility in prices when this sort of first really ramped up and hit, we saw We certainly saw cattle prices decline, and we bounced back up to about 120. I stuck in a weekly average for last week of about $1, really reflecting some fed cattle sales early in the week at 94 and 95, some late week sales at 105. So I just kind of winged in my own little simple average there, just so we could get a picture of certainly the market volatility, but also the change versus a year ago. And you know, I would point out too, where I pointed out that increased cattle slaughter early in the year, beef production early in the year, about 6% more than a year ago. We already had some fed cattle prices declining, reflecting larger supplies even before all this mess hit. Yet this price decline in the last week, I think really reflects the impact of closing, for example, the JBS plant in Greeley, where we see it exactly in our prices. While we've cut some capacity short term, we've really cut the demand for those fed cattle simply because those plants are closed. And so I think a key going forward is, can we get those plants open? Can we get over the hump of the health worries and all of that, changes in those plants? But if we can successfully reopen those, you know, I think we expand the demand for cattle quite a bit. And then as everything else reopens, we have an opportunity to move beef at much better, and cattle at much better prices. For order for completeness, here's the box beef cutout. That wholesale value of the primal cuts of beef, and talk about volatility. I may be using that in class for a long time, thinking, you know, showing volatility in prices. What this represents, that spike up, is just simply the stampede at grocery stores. You know, grocery stores had already laid in their supplies for what they figured they would sell. We stampeded in there and bought everything in sight. And I say we, all of us consumers, and then we see prices certainly decline. But that gives you an idea of what's going on in terms of the box beef cutout. Last week, if I could have got last week a good average in there, we probably would have seen the box beef, the choice wholesale value of beef, actually go up, reflecting that change within the cutout, within the cuts that we're seeing. Let me jump a little bit here to some calf prices. Again, volatility in our markets of calf prices, 550 pounds, Southern Plains, #1 steers, certainly market volatility, but generally trending lower, as most everything else has. Again, a lot of folks looked at these prices and are trying to figure out what to do in terms of waiting or not to sell. And so, you know, we really see these same effects going on in the marketplace. 750-pound feeder steers, again, that same volatility. You know, I get questions about this a lot. One of the things I would say is, you know, what's another steer worth, or what's this feeder steer worth if it's going to finish in, you know, August, September, October? What's our price expectation out there to think what we can sell that sucker for at its full grown weight, and then what do we want to pay for them now? And certainly I think that reflects this volatility in the futures market, and volatility in thinking about what's this market going to be like down the road in 4 or 5 months, with a heck of a lot of uncertainty. So I think that's again driving those prices certainly lower. You know, I thought I'd take a minute just to dig into the cutout a little bit, our wholesale value. You know, switching from restaurants to grocery stores, you know, we eat different things, right? We eat different things at restaurants. You know, we may get hamburgers at the store. Oftentimes we go to a restaurant, we're going to get a ribeye. We may not sell the same ribeyes at the grocery store. Different sizes, different weights, different total supplies going through there. And also grocery store purchases really reflecting this idea of a recession. We know from the Great Recession, you know, folks didn't quit eating beef, but they did buy fewer steaks, but they bought a lot more ground beef. And so as we got two things going on. One is this switching from restaurants to grocery stores. The other one is grocery store buying changing to reflect worries about a recession and what they're going to be able to sell. So this middle meat idea, the stuff that comes from the middle of the carcass, which is generally, my gosh, that's the great stuff that we like so much, steaks. Most of our steaks come from there. And what I thought I would use is a wholesale ribeye price. Gosh, before this hit, we were pushing about $8.30 a pound at wholesale for ribeyes. Look at that collapse in ribeye prices. Really going away from restaurants, all of us moving our purchases to grocery stores. You know, I think we see a lot of folks going to restaurants and taking, you know, getting pickup, taking home stuff, really trying to support their local businesses. I suspect that as we look through that, we're moving more hamburgers and pizzas and things like that through that, rather than ribeye steaks and baked potatoes and things like that we would get at a steak place that we like to go to. So we certainly see this decline in ribeye prices. And this generally holds for the rest of the middle meats as well. If we were looking for some fillets, we actually saw some price strength in the strips, which follows a seasonal pattern. We tend to have better New York strip type prices this time of year, but those are starting to decline as well. So I think that's a great picture when we talk about what's happening underlying in the meat. We get a pretty good idea right there. And on the flip side of that, I'm just going to use chuck prices. We all know what chucks are. You know, a good chuck roast. For those of us who still do roasts, yet the chuck is used for so many other things as well. Flat iron steaks, that value cut that's relatively new in the marketplace. Yet that idea of more hamburger, more ground beef, we grind a lot of chucks. And as you look at this on balance, we think about the ends of the carcass, the chucks and the rounds, skyrocketing in price. Some support for ground beef that supported our cull cow prices, at least until we get this surge of dairy cows going on. Yet the middle meats show tremendous weakness. And so what we see in the cutout value, which is the kind of the weighted average of all of these wholesale cut prices, is we've got a lot more value in the chucks and the rounds and ground beef and trimmings, and a lot less value in the middle of the carcass, the high value steaks. So, you know, I think that's really instructive of, you know, you get a good picture of what's going on at the retail, where we're headed in terms of retail, in terms of what we're seeing in these wholesale values. And so I thought that'd be worth bringing too. I got some contact information here. I'll tell you, that's my last slide. That is my office phone number at the bottom. And since we've all been told to work from home, that won't do you any good, but shoot me an email. It's pretty simple. danderson@tamu.edu. And certainly, I love hearing from people, and there's so many great questions out there that folks have that, you know, heck, shoot me a note or give me a call. And after that, it's just a big old thank you. Thanks for having me on. Let me see if I can unshare this screen here. Maybe. Let's see.
All right. Well, thanks, David. We certainly appreciate you and Ken being on with us today. We've got a handful of questions. Chase, do you want to ask those questions?
Yeah, Jamie. One of the first questions we have, this could be for either Ken or David. What will consumers see at the grocery stores in the next few months as far as quality and price on beef?
Well, this is Ken. I think it's going to vary some. We're seeing the market go up just this past week. Dr. Nan's showing there the prices of the product, and that's mainly because of the slowdown in the packing house capacity. So that demand for that product, we're going to see a pretty good jump here until we get our capacity back at the packing house level.
You know, I'd add to that with one comment. You know, one of the things in terms of grocery stores, you know, if all of us consumers run in there and we buy everything in the case, there's not much incentive for a grocery store to run a special to get us in there to buy something. And I think that's particularly the case with ground beef. You know, it's so versatile. We use it for so many things at home. It's going to be, I think we're hard pressed to see any specials on it just because all us folks are buying it anyway. And so I I think we'll see that. You know, in terms of supplies, you know, one of the things we're already seeing is more cattle. The cattle that we are sending to slaughter and that are being graded, we have a larger percent of cattle grading choice. And so in terms of those quality grades, as weights go up, there's going to be more choice available too. So I just thought I'd add a couple things there. That's a great question.
Okay, great. All right, guys, the next one. What do you tell or suggest those that are trying to decide, do they need to wait and hold on or sell?
Okay, this is Ken. I had to move another room. Some noise was going on here at the market. Right now, I've been basically advising them as a whole. If you got big cattle and you need to move them here for long, coming off wheat fields or oat fields, I'm advising my folks there to move them before the big rush hits. The big majority of the cattle looks like it's going to hit in May. Get away from that time frame, and I'm going to say this week and maybe the next week, you've got a little bit of opportunity there for a large number of them hit, I think, at that time. If you ever just got cows and calves out on the pasture and you got light calves, just spring calving, some fall calving, you've got some time to still wait, I think, to where some things could settle down a little bit, especially get this packing house capacity thing worked itself out. There's a few places, I think, when these big number of yearlings hit, there's some of these feed yards. I know like last week, there's one or two of them. The guy's going to ship his yearlings to the feed yard. The feed yard, though, because he could not ship fat cattle, wasn't able to take the yearlings. So the yearlings are still on wheat, and hopefully they can get shipped here in another week or two. But some of that could occur if these packing house levels do stay a little bit small and reduced due to the problems there. So that's why I kind of look at it. I think move the bigger cattle if you need to move them, especially wheat or oats, pretty quick. And then if you would on the lighter cattle, I think you're going to go ahead and hold them as a whole. The grass market is pretty well getting to where all these folks bought these light cattle at pretty high prices, a lot of demand. We're about to have that evaporated because most of them will move their cattle to grass within starting around the first part of May. So you're going to see that change, and then you're going to see a lot more fat calves. Those will get a little cheaper probably during May too.
I think so.
Okay.
No, I'd say I'd say one other thing. You know, we really see prices decline rapidly for really heavy feeder cattle. Once they get over like 800 pounds, we see a sharp price discount. And so, you know, I think that, you know, argues just you make sure you don't wait too long. But if you know, for those heavier ones now, I think I'd go now rather than waiting.
I agree, because you're talking about when you bring a 900 pounder in there, fat and fleshy, you don't have a lot of friends on those. And you get on up to, we had some 1,000 pounders last week and not many friends on those either. They're not as efficient or anything. So you got to be real careful, because you could have a diminishing return on your animal if you get them too big and too fat and too fleshy on into May. So I think keep that in mind as you move along.
Okay, next one, guys. What effect will meat and cold storage have on the supply chain with plants being shut down?
I'll let you take that one, Dr. Anderson.
That's a good one. You know, I get asked a lot about that. And, you know, if I were to look back, you know, if 30 years ago, when we were really struggling with demand, beef demand, we looked at cold storage. If that cold storage went up, people really took that as really evidence that we didn't have any demand for our product. Cold storage today, you know, we ought to see some cold storage numbers go up, except we're slaughtering fewer cattle. So what is going on out to grocery stores. I'll tell you, the next USDA cold storage report comes out this week. So, you know, but when we look at cold storage, even when we talk about real big numbers, and we talked about that, it seems like last year there was a record amount of beef in cold storage. But you know what? It amounted to about 8 days of our use. And so the cold storage stuff really, I don't think is really a big deal necessarily. I also think cold storage reflects a lot of our trade. The more beef we export, the more we have in cold storage, because it's in the pipe. And because it's beef, it's got to be in cold storage. And so some of that growing cold storage numbers really reflects that we trade more, that we export more. And the numbers really aren't so big that they reflect a huge amount of supplies weighing down our market. So I think those plants closing down probably is going to have an effect to kind of holding back cold storage. In a way, we're saving our beef right now live on the hoof rather than slaughtering them and putting them in cold storage because of the slowdown in closure in both packing and processing plants.
Hey, Jamie.
Yes.
I'd like to just make a comment too, and a little different to let folks understand the supply chain. Back when this first started, back in about 4 weeks ago, as the rush on the grocery stores started occurring and everything was begun to be basically out, no toilet paper, no Kleenex, a lot of different supplies. We had our local grocery store burnt to the ground, and that's only one store over in San Saba. So we met with the owners of that following day after the fire. And it's very interesting in what had happened on that supply chain. We met with them anyway. They got a building leased. We had the store and got it back running up in 6 days. Luckily, we were able to do that. They got a portable meat cutting trailer, 18-wheeler that they have. I think that they put that in the deal. Cost about $1 million something they have. They can move that different locations. So they're actually cutting meat out there in a 18-wheeler trailer that's all refrigerated, got a cold storage in it, everything. But their big thing was that as a whole, prior to this incident, when COVID-19 occurred, on average of their stores, which they cover all of West Texas, Central Texas, parts of New Mexico, Colorado, and parts of Western Oklahoma, they were loading an average through their stores, loading 150 trucks every night that would be distributed out to the grocery store. And that had been pretty well staying steady all the time. Well, when COVID-19 occurred, all of a sudden their orders turned into 400 truckloads a night. That's what they needed to ship to make every store full. Well, they're able to get about 50 trucks out of the oil field and put trailers on them. So they were able to ship about 200, 210 truckloads to help kind of get caught up. But if you look at a 10-day span, they were 2,000 truckloads behind of getting to their grocery stores of what those products they needed there. And then what started happening in that deal, they'd order, say, for instance, a truckload of beans from a company. That company was mass produced them. They'd allocate our grocery store or that whole company only 10% of what they ordered, or maybe 20%. Allocate another company 20%. So that's why we saw this huge lag in production. And it just took the world by surprise of changing the distribution system. And they finally, to some degree, have got caught up in a lot of areas, but not all areas. It's pretty interesting to see that how fast that changed in about 6 or 7 days.
Yes.
You know, I think all the way, we have a lot of consumers, we talk about people being, separate, that they're not involved in agriculture. So many of our consumers are a couple of generations removed and everything. We talk about, the kind of educating people about agriculture, even us in agriculture. I think we're all going to learn a heck of a lot about the supply system and the supply chain and packaging and trucking and just how we move stuff around. And you place orders. If you place an order 6 weeks out, planning for what you're going to normally sell, and you have something like this hit, there's just no way. It doesn't turn on a dime. It takes some time. But I think we're all going to learn a heck of a lot more about our supply chain, for all the way from pastures and fields to the consumer at the store and restaurant. There's a whole bunch of stuff in the middle that we don't ever think about because it just works. And we're going to learn a lot. And I think, I think knowing some more about that as all of us and being a little more educated on that is probably a good thing. Although I'd rather not have the bad thing happen to teach us, but I think we're going to learn a lot of good stuff here that should help us with some understanding anyway. Go ahead.
Good deal. Okay, we got a few more, Jamie. When you guys say that there will be some volatility in short term, what length of time does that look like to y'all?
Man. I'll take a stab at that. I certainly would have said over the next couple of months, but quite honestly, I think the rest of this year, we're going to see the ripple effects of this. Simply, we talk about slowing down cattle to feedlots, backing up cattle, closing packing plants, then reopening plants, placing cattle. So many people, I think, have held back their calves and not taken them to their auction market. Yeah, those are going to come. So we got some, we may get as we've seen some higher prices and then prices go down, we got, I think, a big run of cattle coming. I think May also. Lots of cattle means some lower prices, so that contributes to that volatility. So, I think we've got some months of this to go all the way through the system.
I have to agree with you. I think there's a lot of unknowns out here that we just don't know what to expect. We've never been through anything like this. So there's a lot of hurdles that we'll have to cross that we're not aware of. There'll be some that'll spike it up. Some will spike it back down. I think a lot too, we'll start seeing a little bit more in the next couple of weeks how we're going to reopen America. I think every state may be a little different. That may have an impact on us all too, and how we start getting back in the business open. We may have some setbacks, they said, along the way if we get a hot spot. So I think we're going to be in a volatile market for quite a while, at least through the end of this year, until we get everything kind of figured out and get closer to some kind of vaccine being out there or a high degree of testing of folks.
I'm going to go out on a limb a little bit and say, as I look kind of as an economist and fundamentally at supplies and demands, I think we still have, particularly on the calf side, some opportunity for better prices this fall than we had a year ago. I think there's a couple things kind of work in the favor of, producers whose, calves are born in the spring and sold in the fall idea. One thing, we got some time for some of this to shake out, but with fewer cows this year, at least in the inventory, there ought to be fewer calves for sale in terms of total numbers in the fall. It appears we're going to produce or at least we're going to plant a heck of a lot of corn and soybeans, and we're going to have, I think, huge supplies of feed. And with lower feed prices, that usually supports calf prices as well. I think the idea too, as we reopen, this idea of what the term is pent-up demand for folks who've been tied up in the house that can't wait to get out, maybe go to a restaurant or get back out. Some things like that could certainly, would certainly be very supportive of the overall economy. So, I think, as we look out towards the end of the year, I think there is some opportunity for those calves that will be moving to market then, at least some fewer supplies and at least some relatively inexpensive feed out there that should help, at least ought to support things a little bit. So kind of a fundamental look, I sort of, that would be in my fundamental market outlook for calves.
I have to agree with that too. And you look also, if anybody's watched the number of heifers that we've harvested this year and last year, and we're seeing these at these female replacement sales, a lot less heifers are being kept in inventory to make mother cows. And it would not surprise me this coming January, we could see our cow numbers have dropped because of last year's economic issues. We have a Tyson plant now this year with COVID-19, but just look at all the heifers that are good heifers that normally wouldn't have kept replacement heifers that are going to be harvested and put in the beef production chain. And that's why you have more tonnage out there to some degree. But I think that's definitely going to impact us. And I got that brighter opportunity, like you said, on into the summer and fall because of some of these other things that have occurred.
Well, I think we're getting real close to the end of our time session here. And
I got one more, Jamie, if you want to get it in or if you want to wait.
All right, we can make it quick.
Okay, guys, is this a good time to freshen up a cow herd by selling older cows and replace with younger ones?
I think if you got some older ones, it can be at times. Right now, you're not seeing a lot of replacement cattle totally come into market because of these replacement sales. You normally you get larger crowds, and all of us in that business have had a little bit more difficulty in how we're going to approach that. But you can sell an old cow, still bring pretty good. You need to watch that packer market if you do, and sell that and come back a young cow. But these younger cows still are bringing quite a bit of money. And they're looking at the future in what they're doing on these younger kind of cows. These little first calf pairs and all that, you're seeing less of those available, mainly because not many heifers are being kept in the marketplace. And so I think you need to really watch as you come along the marketplace. If they're old and they're not producing, I think you need to get rid of them and add something else back to your herd. But as say, if you got a 7 or 6 year old set of cows and you don't have to move them, I'd probably maintain them right now during this time frame.
Perfect. Okay, Jamie, that's all the questions that I'm seeing right now. I've got a bunch of comments of just people wanting to be sure and tell Ken and David, thank you for y'all's time. And it was a great program, great information, guys.
Well, I'm glad
Yes.
to do it. Thank you for inviting me.
Same
Thank
here.
y'all.
Appreciate it. You bet.
Thank you very much. Very informative. We certainly appreciate your time, and that's all we have, guys. Again, thank you to our West Region Cattle Marketing team for putting together a great program like this, and we certainly hope that you got something good out of it that can help you. That's all that we have. I want to tell you thank you for joining us. Stay safe and pray that all this goes away soon so we can get back to our normalcy. Thanks again.
Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.